You are listening to She Has No Limits, the podcast.
Once you're shown, you can't unsee. Time is short, you best believe in yourself. You're a formidable force, diving lessons in the deep end.
She Has No Limits is a movement and community for professional women to come together, be inspired and learn how to design the limitless careers that we deserve.
Catherine Smith, I cannot believe it. This is our first episode.
I know, I'm incredibly excited, Amanda. It seems to have come around really quickly.
So, Cheney Hamilton is founder and CEO of Find Your Flex. And if you go to the Find Your Flex website, you will see that Cheney is quoted as saying, "I felt it was unfair that women who had spent years building their careers before choosing to have kids were penalised when trying to return to work with a little flexibility." In 2017, Cheney launched mummyjobs.co.uk and daddyjobs.co.uk, along with her co-founder and husband, Liam. And they've created a flexible working community spanning the UK and beyond, and it now reaches over 1.5 million people per month. And she's on a mission, isn't she? When you listen to the interview, you can really hear that purpose coming through loud and clear. She's on a mission to help make flex a fundamental part of our society and not just a 6-month request right. Shall we...
Bring her on.
Should we let her loose?
Absolutely.
Let her loose. Hello. Hi, Cheney.
Hi, you all right, Amanda?
Yeah, really good, thank you. Thank you so much for joining us here today. We're delighted to have you. You're our first guest on the show.
I'm feeling the responsibility of that quite heavily.
Welcome, welcome. Really nice to have you here. Don't feel the responsibility. Enjoy.
Thanks, Catherine.
Shall we dive straight in then? I'm very curious to hear about your career so far, Cheney.
You want to go right back to my Saturday job at Greg's, or
oh wow,
more recent?
Well, why not? Greg's is a great place to start.
Oh, it wasn't. It was my worst job ever. I think that was potentially worse than being a recruitment consultant.
Let's start with flex. Let's start with flexibility. So when I was reading up about your company, Cheney, you used this word flex as a noun. And to me, that felt like a new thing. So can we start with where I don't know? Start with my ignorance. Tell us what flex is.
To me, flex is just the incumbent word to just, I guess, bracket a type of working that isn't just in an office Monday to Friday 9 to 5. Flex kind of encompasses, the myriad ways that we can all work now, whether that's agilely, 4 days from the office, 1 day from home, always from different offices, full-time in an office but having flexi time, so the ability to start and do a 10 till 6 instead of a 9 to 5. It could be term time only working, it could be job share, it could be part-time. It's literally the term that just shows I work flex. I don't work Monday, Friday, 9 to 5, but on a seat, that's where I am.
It's when you put it like that, it feels like a very empowering thing. I work flex.
Yeah. And I think that's kind of how we all will be working. I think that is the future of work. And I think you can take it one step further. And, something that I personally believe in is that, we're seeing a huge rise in portfolio careers at the minute. We've got grads coming out of uni who've been fully geared to being managers within 6 months of leaving and things like that. And I think, well, okay, how do we get them to that point? And why can't the flex be doing the same job but for 2 or 3 companies? So you're working full time, but actually that's split across a shared resource. So you're doing, if you're a financial accountant, you do that for 3 separate companies, and you do the bit of that job that you absolutely love to do, that you want to learn. You're getting that benefit of working for different companies as well. So I think, again, it's another way to flex, another way to sort of impact on your career and climb that ladder quickly than you would necessarily just working for one employer, doing one job and doing that for sort of 10 years and moving up.
Can I ask, Jenny, where do you get your passion from? You're so passionate. You know, what's the source? I mean, I'm on board with Flex, but, what's the background?
Well, I've always worked in recruitment advertising. So I say always. I was very briefly at Greggs and Manpower and Baxter Personnel. I did not enjoy doing the recruitment consultancy side, but I moved to NewsQuest, the Northern Echo up in the northeast, when I was about 21, 22. And we learnt my trade, learnt the recruitment advertising. Digital was obviously just coming in at that time. So I came on as a digital recruitment sort of account specialist, and that was my job to sort of grow that platform. And to be honest, flexibility doesn't really come into it, and it didn't come into it until we moved to London. And I worked first for AMRA, sort of working for Trinity Mirror and a whole ton of newspapers and job sites there. And then sort of got headhunted and moved over to Mediaforce. I started working for Johnston Press and North. I think I've worked for literally every newspaper or job board that there is in the country at some point in my career. And when I was at Mediaforce, I fell pregnant. I think I was about 33 when Beatrice came along, and she was born with hip dysplasia. I'd never heard of that before. 1 in 10 children have it. It's normally quite easily fixed. Within a couple of weeks, they normally go into a Pavlik harness for a couple of weeks. And after that, the hips kind of stabilise and develop, and away you go. But unfortunately, B became the 1 in 1,000, that became the 1 in 1,000,000, and it kept failing, redislocating, and she ended up needing surgery or a couple of rounds of surgery. And she was pretty much in a full body cast until she was 15 months old. Obviously, work-wise, pre-B, we'd kind of planned to do shared parental leave anyway, because it was just coming in, and Liam wanted to have that opportunity of being home with B as well. But as it turned out, I went back to work after 5 months full-time, and Liam really, it was a good job we put this in place because he had to be off because he had to do the heavy lifting. We couldn't go to nurseries, we couldn't have childcare because where she was in the cast lifting and all of that kind of stuff was involved. All of her injection sites and everything were covered, so she couldn't really be around other children because of the inoculations. And I guess it was like our first experience of lockdown.
I was just thinking that.
I know, and I'm laughing now, but actually at the time it was horrendous. It was like the hardest time that I think that we've ever been through from a parent perspective, from a relationship perspective. I think we both suffered from depression off and on at that time. And like I said, I went back full time and Liam was off full time. And he used to try and take her to, because we had a little sort of gap where she was out of the cast and we were waiting for the next sort of surgery, where he went to the playgroups and he was the only dad there taking their child and dealing with all of those kind of bits of it. But I think he started to suffer quite badly from depression, from being that separated from society. And I went to my boss at the time and was just like, look, Liam's struggling. I need to go down. He needs to go back to work, even if it's just 1 day a week, and I'll go down to 4 days. And so he can have that adult interaction, have that mental release from just being housebound all the time. It's not a normal parenting thing, is it? Normally that first year you get to go to the playgroups, you get to interact with different type of people. It might not be in a work setting, but you do still get to interact. And my boss at the time, do you know what? He was bloody brilliant. And he turned around and goes, do you know what, Shani, do it. Go down to 4 days. He goes, but I don't want you to lose out financially on top of everything else you're going through. So I'm still going to pay you your full-time hours. So that obviously helped us a lot. And we kind of got through it. And I think that was my first experience of any flexibility at work. But to be fair, that was the first time I needed it. So it was quite nice that he responded in that way. But it was just 2 years later when by that point B was healthy and I fell pregnant with Eliza and I was on maternity leave and I was starting thinking about, okay, well, how do I want to go back to work? Because I think I was about 5 months in. I thought, I don't want to be there all the time. I would quite like to still see my children. So we were in London. I was probably only seeing them 20 minutes a day when I was at work, because by the time we've done the commute there and back, bedtime's at 7, you literally get to see them for 20 minutes. And I didn't want that. So I had a chat with him about how that working week could look. And to be honest, he wasn't interested. And I think the big difference this time was that both my children were healthy. And this time I was going to be setting a precedent that didn't when I had a sick child. So obviously that peed me off a little bit. Don't know if we're allowed to swear on these podcasts. And I thought, you know what? I'd worked in recruitment advertising. I'd worked on job boards for forever. I knew it was something that I wanted to do at some point, and I just needed that niche, that kick up the butt, that something that actually would allow me to have a bit more flexibility and maybe set up on my own and do my own thing. But I didn't want it to be just another generic job board. I wanted it to be focused, and initially we just had the Mummy Jobs platform. It was focused on senior women trying to access still senior careers, but with flexibility, because that just wasn't available at the time. You had things like Working Mums and Timewise, but they were all very much part-time focused, and it wasn't really about senior women. It was just about promoting jobs that were part-time, which meant a lot of senior women were having to take a huge step back into junior roles. And there were, just because we've had a child doesn't mean that we've lost our drive and our ambition. And so I wanted to build a platform that offered those jobs, because I knew that they existed, because I've worked in recruitment advertising for forever, but businesses just weren't very good at promoting them, or weren't specific about promoting them in that way. So I wanted to do that, but whilst developing that job board, I really wanted it to be about community as well. So I wanted to have career coaches on the platform. I wanted to have, the biggest bugbear for women returning to work after they've had a child is about reskilling or upskilling or making sure their skills are still up to date, because if they've had that 1 or 2 years out. I wanted to have a chat thing in there. I wanted it to be across social. I didn't just want it to be another Indeed or, because they don't really add value. Yes, it's somewhere you go and you stick your CV and you see what happens, but I wanted it to be bigger than that. I wanted it to have that community. And I think you asked where the passion kind of comes from. I think very early we had so many women getting in touch, telling us their story, and really sharing. I think it just drove my passion. It drove me to understand that actually this is not a rare phenomena. This is a common phenomena. There's a lot of people being impacted by this. And, daddy jobs followed. And that was because Liam was obviously, after taking shared leave, he was just like, we need to have a sort of similar space for dads. And then not long after that, we went viral for the first time, and we had 1.27 million people get in touch with me over 10 days. Again, a mixture of, can we apply for these jobs even if we're not parents, or sharing their story, sharing why they needed that flexibility. And we kind of just took a step back and just thought, you know what, this is bigger than parenthood. It's bigger than women. This is a cultural shift. This is what needs to be supported. And I guess that's where the drive and ambition comes from, that I'm not just doing it for me. I'm doing it for the, millions of other people in the UK and further afield that need flexibility in order to access work and life. And, we're not just born to work, are we? We're born because we've all got our own personal drivers, and it is how we can help people facilitate that.
Can I ask you, in relation to your story and with B, were there times where you just wanted to throw in the towel and just think, do you know what, I can't work on top of this?
No, I needed work. That was my break away from the crap that was going on at home. Don't get me wrong, there was tough days. There was times where me and Liam didn't think our relationship would survive. And it's weird looking back on it now. I think we've mentally blocked out so much of it, and it's when you really start thinking about that period that you kind of start welling up and you start feeling that old fear. So I'm sure it was much harder at the time, but I think we protect ourselves, don't we, as we move past these really intense periods. And so I think we've quite successfully mentally blocked a lot of it out. But obviously, like I said, I was still working at Mediaforce at that point, and I think work was just an escape and a release from it. And I think that's why I wanted Liam to have that too, and to go down to 4 days at that time. I think I wanted to chuck it all more when, like I said, when Eliza came along, and I wanted to be able to work from home and not to be beholden to the commute in the office. I think that's when it impacted me more.
Mm.
I was wondering, Cheney, how old are the girls now?
6 and 4, and then I've got Harry, who's coming up too.
Oh gosh. In for a penny, in for a pound.
Absolutely.
I was wondering how things have changed, in terms of you there with that mission and that overwhelming purpose around Flex, and where we are now, especially with the global events that have happened.
Yeah, it's been, I couldn't have picked a harder 3-4 years to start a business, given that we had Brexit, COVID, and then now COVID and Brexit. It's been I mean, it's been a blessing in a way because it's allowed us to be completely agile, and we have learnt to pivot like you wouldn't believe in terms of the business. And I think, you know, if we can overcome that and still be here, then, you know, when we do get back to those bountiful years, then, you know, the business is going to absolutely fly, and we can only get stronger. That's certainly the way that I view it. I mean, it took us a while to get off the ground because obviously I was 5 months into my maternity leave when I decided that this is what I wanted to do. And we started, because it was only myself and my husband right at the very beginning, sort of putting it all together. And then we've got a few other people involved in terms of sort of sales. And we didn't get that first like proper paying client for about 6 months. We were having to sort of give the platform a way to sort of build that community and, you know, get us to the point where actually you've got to showcase employers that actually by using this platform that they can recruit, and they can recruit a different talent pool than they would get from an Indeed. You've got to kind of show them the buy-in, show them the benefits of their employer brand and everything else that they're doing. So it took us a while to get there and to understand what our sales narrative and everything was, all the while sort of, you know, being informed by our community. What did they want? Where were they based? What kind of work were they looking for? So then we obviously had to go away and find the employers that would be willing to come on board with us to sort of promote that, because we never just wanted employers to just promote their jobs. We wanted them to share their journeys as well. You know, why was flexible working important to them? What was the benefits to their business of having employees come into the business on a flexible basis? And that again, and that has changed, and that's been a big learning curve over the last few years. I mean, we're now at the point where we've almost gone one step further than flexibility again, and we're actually showing employers that flexibility is the main driver for an inclusive and a diverse workplace. And when we look at actually the breakdown and the makeup of our followers and our audience that use the platform, you know, 22% of our audience is from the LGBTQ community. 55% of our audience don't even have children, or have children that are grown and have left the nest. And it's been a really interesting thing that flexible working, rather than it being a tick box exercise, actually it's become a thing that candidates look for flexible working, because then they sort of assign that with an inclusive employer, and they think, well, actually, if that employer is offering flexible working, they are obviously inclusive. So then me as an LGBTQ person, regardless of whether I want flexibility or not, what I do want is a home away from home to work, and to work with an employer that has the values that I have. And I think that's certainly kind of where we've ended up over the last sort of 3-4 years. And yes, we've been impacted by COVID and people not having to advertise for work, because obviously the first lockdown, it was literally just, you know, the supermarkets that were open and, you know, the healthcare services. So people didn't really need to advertise. They knew where to go to find jobs. And I think businesses have gotten used to how to work now, that have had to pivot themselves to offer remote working or agile working, or make their offices COVID safe. We've kind of got past that sticky point now. And yes, 70% of UK businesses had to furlough, which means there is still a hell of a long way to go for businesses to actually get to full flexible working. The 30% that didn't furlough have been able to pivot really effectively and have then started to just do their onboarding remotely, which is probably something they didn't have to do before. And we're kind of getting there now. It's just that other 70% that we kind of need to haul along for the ride, make them future-proof.
So in terms of getting employers and businesses there, how much of an education job are you still having to do? So you, for example, earlier were talking about when you first came to this market and there were lots of part-time recruiters. Are there still employers who think that flexible working means part-time working, for example?
Yes, but I feel like I've gone from having the conversations where I'm saying to an HR director, no, we don't just mean part-time by flexible work. And I feel like I'm now always saying, well, we don't just mean working from home when I'm talking about flexible work. And it's like we've completely flipped it on the head. Yes is the honest answer to that question, because I think for a lot of people that is still a default. It is just part-time. So there has been a huge education piece there. And when people are talking to us about, okay, so I want to look at flexible working for my business, where do I start? I often say, well, actually, go back and talk to your teams now, because they're probably working flexibly without you even realising it or writing it into contracts or having it there as a sales tool or a sales point to attract new candidates. Within teams, we all have if you're a good line manager, your team will be made up and work in different ways. One of them may work from home one day a week. One may come in early every day a week so they can finish slightly earlier so they can do the school run, and it'll already be there. It just won't be written down. So I kind of always tell them to go back and do that in the first instance and actually, talk to your teams and find out what works for them currently and what can you actually flesh out into a policy, and then sort of that's when you then grow the conversation from there to start talking about other elements of flex that they may be willing to initially put in place, or they might need additional training for, to learn how to manage a team that is completely agile. And I think I always say to people, if it's the first time we're talking to them, it's the first time we talk about flex, I don't expect them to spend a penny with us for like the first 6 months, because it takes that long to go back and embed that culture in, and then they'll start advertising with us. So it's kind of, you have to have the love for it, because you wouldn't get them to that point in 6 months' time if you didn't have the love and you don't feel the benefit of flexible working, because you have to impart that to them. It is a huge education piece. So it's not just going in, working for Indeed or one of the other job boards and sort of saying, I'll advertise a job on our site. It's so much bigger than that. There's so much of the work that needs to be done. So it's definitely more consultative, more than sort of anything else that we do. So that's kind of why you need the passion.
We can relate to that, can't we, Catherine?
Oh, we can.
We've got the love. We've got the love. Another thing that we can relate to, that we have in common with you, is that we three and many others who will be listening to this want to use their work to make the world a better place. And I love how you talk on your website about those bigger societal issues and how flexible working can impact on them. Can you tell us a bit more about that, Cheney?
Sure. And it's kind of where we're driving towards this year. So we are, as you know, we're always talking to our community. We're always talking about what impacts on them. I think, one of the big things that we've seen this year because of COVID is our society coming together in some ways and sort of moving apart in others. And I think where we come together, I think there's a lot of work still to be done. So, I mean, we can all see, we could all see those clear weather reports. Early COVID, when everyone was literally locked down at home, we saw the impact that it had on climate change by people working remotely. But then we also started to see the impact that working remotely all the time was having on mental health. And we started to see, that's when you do start seeing how robust businesses are in terms of picking up on that and following up with that. I mean, anecdotally, we had a lady that came and did a presentation for us at one of our events a couple of years ago, and she had a PR business and everyone worked remotely. And it wasn't like today, because obviously technology kind of keeps us all together today. So we can have our Zoom chats and you've got Slack, so you can always communicate with each other. This was kind of a little bit before that. And actually a member of her team had died, and they hadn't realised for like 3 months that a member of their team had died, just because that communication wasn't there. We've all been in businesses, I'm sure, where, somebody may have taken their own life. And that's when you're there with each other together every day, and we're just not picking up on those signs. And that's obviously compounded when everybody's working remotely. So it's picking up on those things, and businesses having to learn to not just see an employee as a number on their bottom line. They're actually having to engage employees properly for the first time if they're a good employer, wanting to make sure that everybody's healthy. So you've got the mental health touch point there. You've got, the touch points for accessibility. If you're have a visible disability and you're in a wheelchair, for example, you can't physically access an office if it's not wheelchair proof or what have you. Those people will need remote working and agile working to be able to access that employment opportunity. So you've got that kind of thing there. So, and then, as I said, when you then take that out and it touches the diversity angles, 43% of our audience is from a non-white background. I don't like to use BIM, but I never know what the right word for people of a non-white lineage is these days. Does that sound horrible? I don't know what to say there. So obviously we are looking at the breakdown of our audience and how that impacts. So we kind of got to the point where we discovered all of this, but then we also, through lobbying and talking to Parliament and things like that, also then saw very quickly that, yes, COVID has had this massive impact on job losses, but actually there's something bigger coming down the road. So we're looking at low birth years. We're also looking at the fact that government are already telling us over the next 10 years, we're going to lose in the UK about 9 million jobs to automation. So that's a huge issue there. But you've also got to think of, you're not just losing 9 million jobs to automation, you're also losing entry-level points for people going into work for the first time. So that entry-level point becomes much higher than where it is now, because these lower-end jobs have all been lost to automation. Therefore, we need to be talking to schools and colleges and universities, making sure that we're upskilling our children so that entry-level point in business is achievable. Otherwise, you've got another lost generation. So we've kind of been working on a new accreditation that goes beyond IIP, beyond time-wise, beyond the other accreditations that are out there, but to actually encompass everything. So businesses become the societal change makers, because politics, unfortunately, can't cover it because they work in 5-year blocks. And those 5-year blocks means that they're short-sighted. They're not looking at long-term planning. They're not looking at the future of work. They're not looking at what needs to be done now to safeguard those jobs in the future, because what they don't want to do is give the next incumbent or whoever comes into office after them, God forbid it's the opposition, because they definitely don't want to give them, an own goal. And so we as a business will be spending 2021 not just encouraging businesses to do flexible working, but encouraging businesses to become the leaders that we need for the future. It's not taking politics out of it. We'll have a summit once a year where these business leaders will come together, and we'll share with MPs best practice. We'll share with them where legislation needs to help support other businesses to get to that point where they are also societal change makers. But that's, I think, where we need to be. So, yes, we're a business, we're a job board, we're so much more than that. We do the lobbying, we are looking at the future of work, and that's where all my passion comes from. And that's, I've got 3 children. I want to make sure that when they grow up, they've got jobs, that they can access jobs, and that it's not just about jobs, that it gets to be about life as well.
You're making me wonder, Cheney, what it's like to work for you as a leader, and your philosophy around your own leadership, and the culture of your own organisation. How's that?
Well, Helen has to rein me in. So Helen is my number 2, my marketing and social media person, but she keeps me together, because otherwise I will go off on about 3 different tangents at any given time. I think I'm definitely strategy led, and I expect people to lead by example, and which is not always the best for sort of not looking after your teams. I think that's the wrong way of putting it. I don't think I'm easy as a leader or a manager to work with. But I expect people to pull me back. I expect people to question and to add their opinion. And I'm always happy to hear their thoughts. Where they think we should be going. What is passionate to them, because it might be something that me from my own perspective haven't thought about. That's where the automation kind of side of it came in from. And I think I'm good in a lot of ways, and I think I'm probably really bad in a lot of ways as a leader as well. But I think if I'm anything, I'm passionate. I think people get carried along and buoyed along in that passion and that energy, and I think they're excited to work for our company. In terms of the day-to-day stuff, there's probably people who do it better in terms of leading teams. But in terms of the bigger picture, I think that's kind of where my skill lies.
Can we talk about women?
Mm-hmm.
You've mentioned that your communities serve a whole range of segments of the working population, not just women. Mm-hmm. But given that She Has No Limits is largely about women and our wonderful allies, let's talk about flexible working in relation to women-specific challenges. Mm-hmm. Can I ask you about the cliche that a woman can have it all? What's your view on that?
I think she can have what she wants. She may not get to have it all. I think it's really hard to say, can you have it all? Because I don't think anybody can have it all, whether you're male or female. I think even if you're a billionaire, there's still something more that you want. So I think it just depends on your outlook on life. And I think it's about setting achievable targets whilst you're still pushing yourself, but having achievable outcomes. Otherwise, you're never going to be happy. My husband always says to me, well, what's the next thing? Because I'll achieve whatever it is I've put out there for me to do. And then, so then what's the next thing? He knows I can't just stand still. But everybody's different. If you shoot for the moon, as long as you set yourself achievable things along the way, I think you can get there. But it's about setting yourself those goals and a path to get to those goals. So I don't know, does that answer your question? I guess, yes, you can have it all if you set yourself achievable targets.
It does. There's no right or wrong answer to that question.
There isn't. And I think just to sort of flip what you were saying on the head about, having it being about women, for me, flexible working for all is about women, because I think more men need to work flexibly to ensure that more women get to senior levels and to get to have their career goals, because everybody's doing it rather than it just always being a fight for women to get there. We're really proud that our platform is about, I think it's 47% male now. And I think that's amazing, because when we're going to start looking at gender pay gap reporting and things like that, that is so important. We need men to be allies to say that this is the future of work, to haul everybody else along with us, because otherwise, in these male-dominated boards, if they're not doing it at board level and they don't understand the benefit for it, they're never going to get senior women into those roles, and we're never going to get women to where they need to be. We need men to be experiencing the same issues that we do, so that we can overcome them together.
Yeah.
It's interesting, Cheney, because clearly you've worked with a lot of companies and a lot of women, and you have a lot of insights. For people who are listening, particularly women who are looking to find a better balance, possibly wanting to spend more time with their families, but, as you said at the beginning of this conversation, aren't looking to reduce their aspirations or their aims. What advice have you got for people who might be listening, thinking it's all very well talking about it hypothetically, but how can I get that balance? How can I achieve that equilibrium?
Yeah, I see what you say. I think you've got to understand how you want to work and what your goals and achievements are. And if it is to still progress in your field, you've got to be comfortable with knowing how to do that, because you're going to have to sell that into an employer, that you can still do what needs to be done. You can still reach the goals that you need to reach to reach those senior levels. And I think, I always sort of carried on working full time. I just did it full time flexibly. So whether that was like a couple of days from the office, a couple of days from home, or, it's condensing hours or whatever that might be, I think the main thing to be is upfront, to say to employers, and I always say, put it in your CV, put it in your personal statement, that, you're a hardworking person, that you've got this ambition, that you've got this drive to reach the top of your career, industry, goal, whatever that might be, but that you want to do it flexibly, and these are the hours that you prefer to work. But if they're not doable, I'm also happy to talk about this way of working, because then what you will get is, when you do get that phone call to call for an interview, you're getting an employer who's completely already on board with what it is you hope to achieve and will help you get there. There are some fantastic companies now that are becoming more like that. I mean, we've seen Zurich do so many brilliant announcements. You've got the whole, women in insurance industry now, making sure that women still get to the top and that they don't lose them out of that industry. You've got the civil service who, are becoming better and better all the time about flexible working. And then we do all of their director and deputy director roles on a flexible working basis. We do all of their advertising. We get named in their gender pay gap reporting, and as their sort of partner in making sure that women get pulled through. So times are changing, and I know there was something else that you said in a few of the emails that we've had back and forth about what have you learnt most as a parent. And I think, not that I was dishonest before, but honesty is the best policy, and being really clear in what your objections are. And I think, if you're that upfront from day one with your employer, you're much more likely to get what you want. I think there's a lot of people who still think, well, I'm just going to keep to myself what my flexible working ambitions are, and I'll bring it up once I've been there 6 months. Now, if at the end of that 6-month period, you put your request in and it gets declined, you've just wasted all that time. It costs employers £5,000 on average for every single person that they hire, and that's just wasted. It's wasted for them, and it's wasted for you and your ambition. So why not just be completely upfront, put it in your CV, research the companies that you're applying for. most of them will have their flexible working policies on their website somewhere. You can, look it up, frame them within your emails and your letters that you're sending to them along with your CV, and make them put the money where their mouth is. And I think that's probably the easiest way to do it and the best piece of advice I could give.
Yeah, we run family leave coaching programs for some client organisations, and time after time after time you will be talking to a returning parent, and she, for the most part, will be worrying that she's going to be judged when she wants to leave at 4:30 when she comes back into the workplace. She's worrying that her boss, who hasn't got kids, can't empathise and therefore is going to be less tolerant of her need to suddenly drop everything because the school has rung because the kid's ill. And we hear these conversations today, 2021, still ongoing, and there is a behaviours gap, let's call it that, between the policy of the organisation and the good stuff that has been laid down in policy and process and the behaviours of managers and leaders. Tell us about what organisations are doing to bridge that behavioural gap.
When we sort of preach to those sort of either getting there or trying to embed it in, you have to bring the line managers and the team managers along for the ride. They've got to be involved from inception, otherwise I don't think it embeds particularly well. If they're on board from day one and they can advise on the policy and on the hiring managers that are doing the interviews and bringing these people in, if they can sort of say, well, look, this is the makeup of the team at the minute, this is how it works, this is, I think somebody coming in on an agile or a flexible working basis will work best in these ways. You can actually put that in your job description that, this is the flexible working that we think will work for this team. So again, it's about them being as upfront as is it being upfront. I think for companies that haven't involved their line managers and their team managers in that, and they've just gone ahead and written this flexible working policy, that's when it doesn't embed, that's when the culture doesn't shift, and it never will. And those are the businesses that aren't future-proof. I imagine those are the businesses that are currently furloughing a shed load of staff. So it's a societal thing. It's an understanding at both senior level and further down the chain with the line managers and the team members, and if you do have the odd person in a team that tuts every time you get up at 4:00, really we're all grown-ups. We can either, if you're confident enough to talk to that person, why the tut, or if you're happy to go and speak to the HR teams and just sort of say, look, I feel like I'm getting a little bit of pushback here from whether it's your manager or whether it's team members or other people that might not even have anything to do with your team. I remember just anecdotally off when I worked at Mediaforce, our commercial director there, my team used to always get up and go at 5:30, and his team used to sit at the desk till 8:00 at night. And I was like, well, that's on them. Time management. Why aren't they being productive during normal office hours? Why do they feel like, what is the culture of this business if they feel that they need to sit there till 8:00 just to make you feel happy? That's not good. That's not good. And people will burn out and people will leave, and then you've got to start looking at attrition rates and everything else like that. What we're trying to do by creating these inclusive businesses, by being flexible, it's about getting the best out of people, making them happy, and you more productive and more valuable as a business. And I think that's kind of where we're all trying to push towards. So I think there's little things that individually as people we can do by pushing back, but there's also a lot that businesses need to do from a senior level, top down, and from the management level and the team member levels. The ownership is on them. You've not been made a team member for no reason. You need to have that open dialogue with your superiors and with your team below to make sure everyone's happy and working the most productively and efficiently that they are.
Cheney, this series is all about knowing me, self-awareness. So let's ask you a question about your levels of self-awareness. What do you now know about yourself that you didn't know, let's say, 12 months ago?
I didn't know I'd still be sat here as a CEO of my own company because 12 months ago, bloody hell. 12 months ago, I was looking for a part-time job to do this at the same time. The business was hard work, and it was I guess I know now that I can overcome anything, that I can work for a pittance and still survive and still put food on the table and still get to where I need to be, through whether it's, you know, ridiculously hard or super easy. I think I've come to learn how passionate I am about this cause, and what not just myself but my family can do to support me, support the business, to support everything else that we've gone through. And I think further than that, the community, the people that are out there that, you know, have worked for free for us, have, you know, or have massively reduced to what they would normally charge like another business, because they're so passionate again about what it is we're trying to achieve. I think I'm very lucky as a person to be where I am today, and I do appreciate everybody that's helped us along the way.
And Cheney, what do you do to look after yourself? Self-care.
Do you want me to answer honestly?
Yeah.
Red wine.
You mentioned lobbying, your lobbying work. Tell us a bit more about that.
I've always had an ambition, I guess, to do more, to not just accept the status quo, that where I see injustice, that I stand up. I don't know if it's being raised on Disney films growing up that gave me that sort of, you know, women can do anything sort of trait, but it's something that's important to me. It always has been. I'm not 100% sure where it came from. I mean, my parents aren't that way inclined. They don't really have any political ambition, or, you know, I wasn't raised in a household that went and marched for anything particularly. That's not to mean that they didn't care, but it just wasn't part of our day-to-day thing. I feel like now, I don't know whether just politics has become more important to people in general, but I mean, my 6-year-old is well aware of well, I'm a 4-year-old probably, of who the Prime Minister is, you know, what I feel about them and their policy and how they work. And then I don't know whether that's just something that's culturally that's happened over the last sort of 10 to 15 years, but I felt that just because of where we are and the industry that we work in, that lobbying became a natural part of what we were trying to achieve to help us on that journey. I just feel like it's become bigger than flexible working. It's become about, you know, we are at a turning point in our cultural evolution within society. There's, you know, people that are being left further and further behind, and there doesn't seem to be any ambition from politicians to help them catch up. So that has become a big ambition of mine to, you know, I joined the parliamentary group 50/50. Then that's obviously to get more women into Parliament and start, you know, speaking to other people who are, I guess, like-minded, who want to see change in their lifetime, not for me, for my children. And it's about how we can get there. And, you know, I personally, you know, feel party politics has kind of died a death. I don't think that's where we need to be as a country anymore. I don't think it works democratically. I think we need to move past that. I think we all need to be working for the common good, and I don't feel like that's what's happening at the minute. I think the rich are getting richer and the poor are getting poorer. And, you know, I'm from a working class background, you know, but I was brought up with, you know, you work hard, you can get to wherever you want to be. And unfortunately, I don't think people get given that opportunity anymore. Or at least it's not as easy to have that opportunity. You're sort of bound by what schools are in your local area and the accessibility to all of that. And I think it's just an extension of the whole flexible working piece, isn't it? It's about societal change. And, you know, that's kind of where I've ended up from a multitude of reasons over the years, I guess.
That's absolutely fantastic, Cheney. What a great way to finish this podcast together. Thank you so much for your time and for all your passion and energy and the conversation we've had today. Thank you.
Thank you. Blimey, that was a bit inspiring, wasn't it, Catherine?
Gosh, it was fantastic. Really, really thoroughly enjoyed listening to Cheney and all of her experiences. Super reflections there. I'm amazed and totally inspired by her leadership and her purpose. And it's her purpose and her passion that is driving her to get all these fantastic achievements. Yeah,
and when I asked her about whether she was ever tempted to throw in the towel after the difficulties that Beatrice had when she was little, I loved the fact that the answer was an adamant no. And I also loved the fact that she spoke a really important truth. She said she wanted to go back to work, not just because she liked work, but because she needed work to escape or to be an escape from the pressures at home. And I think that is a truth that both dads and mums know but don't give voice to enough. I also love the fact that she talked about the fact that businesses that haven't yet bridged the gap between policy making around flexible working and the inclusive behaviours of managers and leaders are businesses that are not yet future-proofed. I think that's a really important insight and learning for those employers that are listening.
Absolutely. I think my final one was the journey of many entrepreneurs and the triggers that bring us into entrepreneurship and the lack of flexibility in the corporate career, where we then go and carve out very creatively and energetically and with passion our own careers in any which way we possibly can. So it's very inspirational to sit and talk to her. Thank you. It was a great conversation.
That's it for this episode. We'll see you next time. Thank you so much, listeners, for tuning in. We hope you enjoyed. Please send us your feedback. And if you'd like to have a sneaky peek as to who's coming up, then go to shehasnolimits.com and check out our podcast page.
Yes, thank you so much for joining us, and we'll see you all again soon. Take care. All the best.